on this to communicate. I'll yield to the ranking member for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Birx, when were you the coronavirus response coordinator?
I came on board the 2nd of March and left, I think, the 18th or 19th of January, 2021.
Yeah, so March of 2020 to January of 2021. Gotcha. Was there, we've had these conversations with some other witnesses, including Dr. Fauci over a year ago when he had come before about herd immunity. He's never really, I know Mr. Jordan's asked him, what is herd immunity? He wouldn't even define herd immunity. Was there ever an attempt to look at a herd immunity strategy when you were the coordinator?
Certainly there were individuals who discussed the fact that infection should be allowed to run through the population in those who are not vulnerable while protecting the vulnerable. But as many other Americans, I live in a multi-generational household. And so of the 35 million Americans that we just discussed, over 70 that are vulnerable still to severe disease, even some of which have been vaccinated and boosted, that when you have community spread, you cannot protect those 35 million Americans who live in multi-generational households. Only 1.5 million Americans live in long-term care facilities. And so whatever strategy we have has to speak to all of America.
Yeah, and we've even had hearings early off on the nursing home scandal where you saw some governors follow proper scientific guidance to protect seniors in nursing homes, and then you saw others, starting with Governor Cuomo at the time in New York, and unfortunately other governors followed, where they said you have to leave the hospital and go back to the nursing home and actually ban them from testing. Did you see that, and were you concerned about that when it was happening? Because we saw thousands of people die from that failed strategy.
As I was assembling the data, and I think, and hopefully in the written testimony, it's clear, what made America vulnerable was the lack of data streams on just common diseases. We weren't testing for flu. So as the United States Congress has supported me to bring advanced medical care and diagnostic capacity to the far reaches at the end of the road in sub-Saharan Africa, I returned to a country that had less access than what I had created in sub-Saharan Africa. Less access to routine medical care, less access to testing.
And obviously we worked to ramp up testing. When President Biden took office, would you say there was a robust testing plan and apparatus in place to hand over to President Biden?
I think there were two components of that. We were up to about 1.3 million PCR tests a day. We had
growing, right?
And growing. We had put aside $500 million nearly to increase 20 federal surge sites and left that for the incoming administration to execute those sites.
And let me ask you, were you in the administration when there were reports that President Biden was presented with a more robust testing plan and turned it down over a year ago? We've never had a hearing on that. We've tried to, but were you in working with the administration when that plan was presented that was turned down by President Biden?
No, I knew, unfortunately, that my 40-year government career would come to a terminal event if I went into the Trump White House. And let me make it clear.
No, I'm talking about the Biden White House.
So I was gone by the time President Biden came to office.
All right, well, let me ask you this, because you said in your comments earlier, your submitted testimony, quote, "We learned from governors in Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida about data-driven mitigation to decrease community spread while opening retail and outdoor dining." We've seen many people from President Biden on down to some of my Democrat colleagues here in Congress criticize some of those very governors on the strategies they took early off that turned out to be very effective. Do you think that was a healthy thing to do, to be criticizing governors who were using that data to protect the vulnerable citizens while allowing kids to be back in school, for example, and other people to be able to go on with their lives without all of the devastating consequences we saw from shutdowns?
I think we were very fortunate to be able to work with a group of scientists at CHOP in Philadelphia, David Rubin and his team, who modeled for me, and first a model, what mitigations could be taken while maintaining as much of society open as possible. And
So do you think, and I know I'm running out of time, do you think it's healthy when the Biden administration was criticizing some of those governors that you yourself said did things well
those
before they
governors
actually...
proactively looked at the model and agreed to institute them, and we were able to get data that show the impact of that model in decreasing, in real life, at population level health, in decreasing new infections.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You back.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Mr. Maloney for 5 minutes.